What if the woman the world once embraced as the glowing new face of modern royalty was secretly laughing at the very crown she swore to respect? Imagine smiling for cameras, curtsying with elegance, while whispering behind closed doors, "She's just a little old lady in a hat. Why should I bow to her?" Those words weren't invented by tabloids. They weren't exaggerated by gossip magazines. According to Jessica Mulroney, Meghan Markle's closest friend turned reluctant witness, they came straight from Meghan's own lips. And once you hear the full story, you'll never see that royal wedding smile the same way again. This is where the silence ends. Jessica Mulroney, now 45, has finally chosen to break the vow she once made to herself, that she would never betray Meghan's confidence. But what happens when loyalty collides with truth? What happens when you hold secrets so sharp they cut through the very fabric of one of the most powerful families in the world? That is the question Jessica forces us to ask. And if her revelations are true, then Meghan Markle's carefully polished image wasn't just misleading. It was a performance worthy of Hollywood itself. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Think back to 2018. The fairy tale wedding, the global headlines, the idea that Meghan and Harry were going to usher in a new era for the monarchy. The crowds cheered. The commentators swooned. And yet, behind the palace walls, Jessica says she saw a very different Meghan, one who rolled her eyes at tradition, who scoffed at royal formality, and who ridiculed the late Queen Elizabeth, a monarch revered across the globe. Can you imagine the audacity of mocking the world's most respected grandmother figure in private, then curtsying before her in public? But why does this matter now, years later? Because Jessica isn't speaking in a vacuum. She waited. She watched. She kept her silence as Meghan and Harry staged their escape, their interviews, their Netflix series, their million-dollar deals. But with time came distance, and with distance came clarity. And now, Jessica claims the world deserves to know what she saw, what she heard, and why it changes everything about Meghan's story. Let's rewind. Jessica Mulroney wasn't just another acquaintance. She wasn't just a stylist lending Meghan a dress or a socialite brushing shoulders with royalty. She was Meghan's confidant, the friend who stood closest to her during one of the most watched weddings in human history, the friend who shared late-night phone calls, laughter, tears, and whispered secrets. And now, she is the friend who says those secrets expose a chilling contradiction. The Meghan the world adored and the Meghan she knew were two entirely different people. Doesn't that make you wonder? How much of what we saw was real? Was Meghan the victim of royal cruelty, or was she a master manipulator playing both sides? And more importantly, what does Jessica's testimony reveal about the Duchess's true feelings toward the monarchy, toward Harry, and toward the very institution she once claimed nearly destroyed her? To understand this, we have to place ourselves in Jessica's shoes. Picture it. You're standing in Windsor Castle, watching rehearsals for the grandest wedding of the decade. Everyone is tense, staff, royals, even Meghan herself. And suddenly, behind the laughter and casual chatter, Meghan mutters something so dismissive, so shocking, that it stops you in your tracks. Not a playful joke, not a nervous quip, but a mocking remark aimed directly at the Queen of England. According to Jessica, that's exactly what happened. She's just a little old lady in a hat. Why should I bow to her? Those words burned themselves into Jessica's memory. And while Meghan would go on to bow in front of millions, Jessica claims the act was hollow, a performance rehearsed for the cameras, not a reflection of true respect. Now let's pause here. Ask yourself, if someone mocked your grandmother while smiling to her face, could you ever trust them again? That's the betrayal Jessica wrestled with. But Meghan wasn't just mocking any grandmother. She was mocking a monarch, a symbol of dignity and tradition, a woman who had devoted her entire life to service. And that contrast, the public curtsy versus the private sneer, is the contradiction Jessica says the world must finally confront. Of course, Meghan has her defenders. They'll say this is just bitterness, that Jessica is exaggerating, that old friends can twist memories for attention. But here's the thing. Jessica stayed silent for years. She endured the collapse of their friendship. She endured her own scandals. She endured Meghan and Harry's global media storm. If she wanted quick publicity, she could have spoken long ago. But she didn't. She waited until 45, until she could no longer stomach carrying the burden of secrets that paint a very different picture of Meghan Markle. And here's where the stakes rise. Because Jessica isn't just talking about a snide remark. She's talking about a pattern, a consistent disdain Meghan allegedly showed behind the scenes. According to her, Meghan mocked other royals too. She allegedly scoffed at William's stiffness, rolled her eyes at Kate's good girl act, and even dismissed Princess Anne as irrelevant, all while smiling, hugging, and performing warmth in public. Now ask yourself, how many times have you seen someone act sweet in the spotlight while trashing others behind the curtain? Multiply that by the weight of royalty, by the cameras, by the billions of people watching, and you start to see why Jessica's story hits so hard. But here's the twist. Jessica wasn't just a bystander. She was drawn into Meghan's world. She heard the secrets, she saw the contradictions, and in some cases, she says she even defended Meghan to others. Can you imagine carrying that guilt? Knowing you defended someone who was mocking your country's most beloved figure? That's the emotional burden Jessica carried, and it's why she says speaking out now is both painful and necessary. What makes this story even more explosive is timing. Meghan isn't just any public figure now. She's a global brand, a controversial icon, someone who still divides opinion like no one else. Some see her as a victim of racism and cruelty. Others see her as a manipulator who weaponized victimhood. And now, into this firestorm, Jessica throws gasoline, alleging that Meghan's private disdain undermines everything she once claimed about her struggles with the monarchy. So why should you care? Because if Jessica is telling the truth, then Meghan's narrative, the Oprah interview, the Netflix confessions, the podcasts, becomes something else entirely. Not a brave testimony of survival, but a carefully crafted script. And once you start questioning one part of the script, don't you start questioning all of it? That's what makes Jessica's revelations so dangerous to Meghan. Because once the image of sincerity is cracked, it can never be fully repaired. Once the world starts wondering whether the tears were rehearsed, whether the pain was exaggerated, whether the smiles were staged, the illusion collapses. And let's not forget, Meghan's public war with the monarchy wasn't just personal. It shook the royal family. It challenged an institution centuries old. It divided nations. It even caused rifts within families. If Jessica's claims are true, then Meghan's rebellion wasn't born from oppression. It was born from contempt. And that reframes the entire royal drama in ways most of us never expected. So here we are, standing at the edge of a revelation. Jessica Mulroney has opened her mouth after years of silence, and what she claims to have heard and seen is enough to make anyone gasp. But here's the real question. What drove Jessica to finally speak? Was it guilt? Was it revenge? Or was it something far more complicated? A need to reclaim her own voice after being silenced by Meghan's shadow? Because as shocking as Meghan's alleged words about Queen Elizabeth may be, Jessica insists this was only the beginning. She says Meghan's disdain spread further, cutting into friendships, trust, and even Harry himself. And if what Jessica reveals next is true, then Meghan's fairy tale wasn't just built on shaky ground. It was built on mockery and manipulation. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What does it mean to call someone your ride or die, only to one day watch them turn into a stranger? That's the haunting question Jessica Mulroney faced as she looked back on her years with Meghan Markle. Their friendship was more than parties, dresses, and Instagram posts. It was whispered secrets at midnight, frantic phone calls during career crises, and long afternoons spent planning futures neither of them could have predicted. This is where it all began, the hidden friendship that the public barely saw, but which, according to Jessica, shaped the Meghan Markle the world came to know. Jessica wasn't just a stylist or a Toronto socialite with the right connections. She was Meghan's confidant during a time when the actress from Suits was transitioning from mid-level fame into global recognition. Meghan, ambitious and strategic, gravitated toward people who could help her navigate new worlds. And Jessica, with her ties to Canadian high society and her ability to maneuver in circles of influence, was the perfect ally. Picture Meghan in those early days, charming, witty, brimming with dreams that stretched far beyond the television studio. She wasn't content with being a supporting character on a cable drama. She wanted more visibility, more respect, more power. Jessica understood this hunger. She admired it. And slowly, their bond became more than friendship. It became a partnership of sorts. Jessica polished Meghan's image, while Meghan brought star power to Jessica's brand. But beneath that carefully curated surface, Jessica says she began to notice something else. Meghan wasn't just ambitious, she was calculating. She studied people the way some study scripts. Every smile, every anecdote, every gesture was rehearsed for effect. Jessica once joked that Meghan could turn on sincerity like a light switch. But she says over time, that joke lost its humor. Because what does it mean when the sincerity never lasts once the cameras turn off? Here's a question for you. Have you ever had a friend who seemed magnetic in public but drained you in private? Someone who always looked like the perfect person at a party but revealed their sharpest edges when no one was watching? That's what Jessica began to feel with Meghan. And while she kept those thoughts buried, the seeds of doubt had already been planted. Their bond deepened when Meghan started dating Prince Harry. Suddenly, Jessica was thrust into a new role, gatekeeper to Meghan's secrets during the most scrutinized romance of the decade. Paparazzi swarmed. Headlines exploded. Meghan confided every fear, every triumph, every strategy to Jessica. She needed someone who wasn't just a friend but a witness, someone to remind her that she was still Meghan in a world trying to turn her into the Duchess. And Jessica embraced that role. She defended Meghan to skeptics. She helped coordinate outfits that balanced Hollywood glamour with royal modesty. She shielded Meghan from critics, even when Meghan's behavior unsettled her. Loyalty was the foundation of their bond. Or at least, that's what Jessica thought. But here's the twist. Behind the laughter and shared glasses of wine, Jessica began to sense cracks. Meghan's words about the royal family, at first playful, almost teasing, started to carry a sharper edge. She mocked small traditions, rolled her eyes at bowing protocols, and dismissed formalities as silly theater. Jessica didn't think much of it at first. Who wouldn't vent about rigid customs? But over time, the jokes became consistent, pointed, even cruel. Jessica, torn between loyalty and unease, brushed it off. She told herself Meghan was just nervous, using humor to cope with the pressure. But deep down, she knew these weren't harmless quips. These were glimpses of Meghan's true feelings. Now let's pause here. Imagine you're Jessica, watching your best friend step into one of the oldest institutions in the world. The whole planet is falling in love with her. And yet, in private, she's ridiculing the very traditions that make that institution iconic. Wouldn't you start to question what else she was faking? Their friendship, though, wasn't just about palace gossip. There were moments of genuine closeness. Meghan leaning on Jessica during sleepless nights, Jessica supporting Meghan through media storms, the two of them laughing about things only they understood. But Jessica now admits that those moments of intimacy were always shadowed by a gnawing doubt. Was Meghan being authentic, or was she performing even for her closest friend? This inner conflict haunted Jessica through the wedding preparations. She watched Meghan step into her princess role with dazzling confidence, charming even the harshest critics. But she also heard the sharp remarks, the mocking tone, the disdain Meghan reserved for private moments. And that duality left Jessica unsettled. Because if Meghan could perform warmth and respect in public while harboring mockery in private, then what did that say about their friendship? Was Jessica truly a trusted confidant, or just another prop in Meghan's carefully staged life? That is the hidden friendship the world never saw. To the public, Jessica was Meghan's loyal ally, her glamorous best friend standing proudly at her side. But behind closed doors, Jessica was a silent witness to contradictions that grew harder to ignore. And it all came to a head during the royal wedding rehearsals. That was the first moment Jessica says she truly saw Meghan's mask slip in a way she could never forget. Because what Meghan whispered then, according to Jessica, wasn't just a complaint or a nervous joke. It was a remark that stunned her into silence, a remark that made her realize this friendship was carrying a dangerous secret. And that's where the story shifts, from hidden friendship to shocking betrayal. But the first real crack in the friendship came at the royal wedding rehearsal, and it shocked Jessica to her core. What should have been one of the happiest moments in Meghan Markle's life was, according to Jessica Mulroney, the beginning of something darker. The royal wedding rehearsal wasn't just about music cues, flower arrangements, and camera angles. It was about power, about image. about Meghan's desire to control every detail, down to the way people bowed, smiled, and looked at her. And Jessica, standing quietly in the background, witnessed a version of Meghan that most of the world never saw. From the outside, the lead-up to the royal wedding looked like a modern fairy tale. Meghan, the actress turned royal bride, preparing to marry Prince Harry in a dazzling ceremony that would be broadcast to millions across the globe. The dress fittings, the rehearsals, the endless media coverage, it was intoxicating. But behind closed doors, Jessica says the mood was tense, almost suffocating. Meghan wasn't glowing with excitement. She was sharp, calculating, and at times openly scornful of the traditions that surrounded her. The rehearsal began like any other. Staff scurried to finalize arrangements. Family members whispered about protocol. Musicians tuned their instruments. Meghan, radiant in her demeanor, smiled for those watching. But her whispers to Jessica painted a very different picture. She thought it was all theater, Jessica recalls. She would smile at the staff, then roll her eyes the moment they turned away. Meghan's comments weren't nervous jokes. They weren't the playful nerves of a bride-to-be. They were dismissive, laced with sarcasm. Take, for instance, the practice curtsy. This was no small detail. For centuries, the curtsy to the monarch symbolized respect, tradition, and continuity. Meghan practiced the move with grace in public. But in private, Jessica says, she dismissed it as silly and embarrassing. Have you ever watched someone nod politely to a teacher, boss, or elder, only to mock them the second they leave the room? That's exactly the duplicity Jessica says she saw. And while Meghan carried herself like a dutiful bride in public, Jessica claims the private remarks grew sharper by the minute. The turning point came when the rehearsal reached the Queen's entrance. This was supposed to be the most solemn, respectful moment. Everyone stood straighter. The weight of tradition filled the room. But Meghan leaned closer to Jessica and, with a smirk, whispered the words that would haunt their friendship forever. She's just a little old lady in a hat. Why should I bow to her? Jessica froze. The words landed like a stone. This wasn't a nervous bride speaking out of fear. This wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was contempt, open, casual, and shocking. Meghan had just mocked Queen Elizabeth II, the most respected figure in the monarchy, on the eve of her own royal wedding. Pause and imagine this. You're Jessica, standing there in Windsor Castle, watching history unfold. The Queen is about to arrive, the cameras are waiting, and your best friend, the bride, has just dismissed the entire tradition as if it were beneath her. How would you feel? Betrayed? Ashamed? Maybe even complicit for staying silent? Jessica kept her composure, but inside she says she was rattled. She couldn't unhear the words. She couldn't shake the image of Meghan curtsying with perfection in front of the Queen, while privately mocking her moments before. It was the first time Jessica realized Meghan's respect for the monarchy was nothing more than a performance. And here's where the tension thickened. Meghan wasn't just mocking the Queen. Jessica says she took swipes at others too. At Prince William's seriousness. At Kate's robotic smile. Even at Princess Anne's formality. The dismissals piled up, and Jessica began to see a pattern. Meghan wasn't intimidated by the monarchy. She disdained it. Let's not forget the pressure Jessica herself was under. As Meghan's closest friend, she had been pulled into the whirlwind. Reporters hounded her. Photographers followed her. She had to balance loyalty with conscience. And in that rehearsal, loyalty began to feel like complicity. Because here's the contradiction, Meghan looked flawless. She moved with grace, charmed the staff, and played her part perfectly. But Jessica now insists that behind that performance was a running commentary of mockery, disdain, and superiority. Doesn't that make you wonder? If Meghan could ridicule the Queen in private while performing reverence in public, what else was she capable of faking? The rehearsal ended, but the words echoed in Jessica's mind. She left the castle shaken, unsure of what to do with the knowledge she now carried. To confront Meghan would risk the friendship. To stay silent would mean living with a secret that undermined the entire fairy tale. And here's where it gets even more complicated. Jessica wasn't the only one unsettled. Whispers began among palace staff. Subtle looks exchanged. Small notes filed away. Jessica realized she wasn't imagining it. Others sensed something was off too. Still, she stayed silent. She told herself it was just stress, just nerves, just Meghan being Meghan. But the truth gnawed at her. Because deep down, Jessica knew this wasn't a one-off remark. It was the first sign of something bigger, something darker, that would unravel in the months to come. And she was right. Because if mocking the Queen was shocking, what Meghan said about other royals behind closed doors would make Jessica question everything she thought she knew about her best friend. Imagine this. You're standing inside Windsor Castle. The air is thick with anticipation. Staff hurry about, royals take their places, and the stage is set for one of the most historic weddings of the decade. To the world, this is the dawn of a fairy tale. But to Jessica Mulroney, standing just feet away from Meghan Markle, the moment would be seared into memory for something else entirely. Words spoken in a hushed whisper that turned reverence into ridicule. She's just a little old lady in a hat. Why should I bow to her? According to Jessica, those were Meghan's words. Not spoken on a whim, not blurted out nervously, but delivered with a smirk, dripping with irony. Words aimed directly at Queen Elizabeth II, the grandmother of Harry, the monarch of the United Kingdom, the figurehead of the Commonwealth. Stop for a second. Can you picture it? Billions of people would soon watch Meghan Markle bow, with flawless grace, to the Queen. They would see respect. They would see tradition honored. But Jessica swears that in private, the respect wasn't real, it was performance. The bow wasn't homage. It was theater. This is where the contradiction begins to eat at you. Because how could someone play the part so perfectly in public while mocking it so bitterly in private? Isn't that the ultimate betrayal, not just of the Queen, but of the millions who believed in the fairy tale? Jessica says the remark knocked the wind out of her. She stood frozen, unsure how to react. Should she laugh, pretend it was a harmless joke? Should she admonish her friend, risking Meghan's sharp temper? Or should she stay silent and carry the weight of words she knew the world would never forgive if they came to light? And here's the thing. Jessica wasn't some distant acquaintance. She was Meghan's closest ally, her chosen friend to stand by her side. For Meghan to whisper that comment to her meant one thing. She trusted Jessica enough to reveal the truth behind the mask. That trust, however, came with a price: complicity. Now let's dig into the emotional weight here. The Queen wasn't just an old lady in a hat. She was a woman who had dedicated her entire life to service, who had outlasted wars, scandals, and prime ministers, who was admired worldwide for her dignity and resilience. Millions respected her not because she demanded it, but because she embodied it. For Meghan to reduce her to a caricature was more than irreverence. It was contempt. Jessica struggled with this realization. In public, she cheered Meghan on. She smiled for cameras, helped with fittings, smoothed over tense moments. But in private, her mind replayed that whisper again and again. And with every replay, her faith in Meghan cracked just a little more. Now let me ask you, what would you have done in Jessica's shoes? Imagine your closest friend mocking someone beloved, someone whose reputation towers above history. Would you call them out? Would you risk the friendship? Or would you swallow your unease, hoping it was just nerves, just stress, just an isolated remark? Jessica chose silence. For a while. But Meghan's contempt, Jessica says, didn't stop with the Queen. It spread. She allegedly mocked Prince William for being too stiff, joked that Kate Middleton was boring, and dismissed Princess and as irrelevant. The barbs weren't playful. They were sharp, calculated, and delivered with a disdain that left Jessica unsettled. This wasn't just venting. This was a worldview. Meghan didn't see herself as intimidated by the royals. She saw herself as superior to them. And that, Jessica realized, was the root of it all. Here's the irony. While Meghan was mocking royals behind the scenes, she was simultaneously crafting the perfect image in front of the cameras. She curtsied with precision, flashed radiant smiles, and delivered soundbites that made her look like a dutiful, respectful addition to the royal family. The contrast was staggering. And this is where the betrayal stings. Because the world believed her, millions of viewers swooned at the fairy tale. But Jessica knew the secret truth, that respect was an illusion. Think about how powerful that illusion was. Meghan wasn't just deceiving the public, she was shaping history. Every photograph, every video clip, every headline portrayed her as a respectful, graceful duchess. But according to Jessica, those images were no more real than a movie role. Let's not forget the emotional toll on Jessica herself. She wasn't a journalist, she wasn't palace staff. She was a friend. Imagine carrying a secret so explosive, so damaging, that speaking it could shatter your closest bond and ignite global scandal. That's the burden Jessica carried from that rehearsal onward. But here's the twist. Jessica now claims that moment, the whispered mockery of the Queen, was the beginning of the end. Not publicly, not immediately, but deep down, it was the crack that would one day break their friendship apart. Because after hearing those words, Jessica could never look at Meghan the same way again. Still, she stayed loyal. She told herself it wasn't her place. She told herself Meghan was under pressure, that stress makes people say ugly things. She swallowed her doubts. But inside, the questions grew louder. Was Meghan truly authentic? Or was she playing everyone, Jessica included? And that's when the pattern started to repeat. Meghan's words weren't a one-time slip. Jessica says they became habitual, almost routine. Mockery in private, reverence in public. The duality was undeniable. And every time Meghan mocked another royal, Jessica felt the weight of complicity grow heavier. She had become not just a friend, but a silent witness to hypocrisy on a royal scale. And then came the scandal that would push everything into the spotlight, the bridesmaid dress story. Meghan's infamous claim that Kate made her cry, a story that Jessica, with her private knowledge, knew was the opposite of the truth. And that's when Jessica realized the whispered mockery of the Queen wasn't just gossip. It was foreshadowing. Because Meghan wasn't just mocking royals, she was rewriting narratives. But Jessica had no idea that this single story, the bridesmaid dress scandal, would turn her life, and Meghan's reputation, into a battlefield of truth and lies. And once the truth began to unravel, Meghan's mask would slip in ways no one expected. Think about this. If Meghan Markle could whisper mocking words about Queen Elizabeth herself, what do you think she said about the rest of the royal family when no one else was around? According to Jessica Mulroney, the Queen wasn't the only one who bore the brunt of Meghan's sharp tongue. Behind closed doors, Meghan allegedly unleashed a string of biting remarks about William, Kate, and even Harry himself. Each word chipped away at Jessica's image of her once-beloved friend, revealing a pattern of disdain that shocked her more with every passing day. Jessica recalls one evening in particular, shortly after Meghan's engagement to Harry was announced. The two women were sitting in Jessica's Toronto home, sipping wine and going over the endless media frenzy surrounding Meghan's new role. On the television, a news clip showed Prince William walking with his usual poise and formality. Meghan smirked. "William's like a mannequin," she said. "All stiff and proper. No wonder Harry's miserable around him." Can you imagine living with that? Jessica remembers the sting of those words. They weren't harmless jokes. They were dismissals, laced with superiority. William, the future king, reduced to a punchline. And Kate? Meghan's remarks about her were just as cutting. Meghan allegedly described her as Stepford Kate, a woman who played the role of perfect wife and duchess without a shred of authenticity. "She smiles like a robot," Meghan said one night, according to Jessica. "That can't be real. Nobody's that good all the time." Now pause for a moment. Imagine hearing those words from someone who, in public, embraced William and Kate with warm smiles and hugs. Someone who waved, posed for photos, and appeared to adore her new family. Doesn't it raise the question, if she could speak this way about them to her closest friend, what else was she saying in private? Jessica claims the list didn't stop there. Meghan had her quips about Princess Anne too. And, known for her stoicism and sharp wit, became another target. Meghan allegedly dismissed her as irrelevant, saying, "She just looks annoyed all the time. It's like she doesn't even want to be here." And yet, in photographs, Meghan greeted and politely, even deferentially. The performance and the private remarks couldn't have been more different. This wasn't just venting. Venting implies frustration. What Jessica described sounded more like contempt. Meghan didn't just complain about royal traditions. She diminished the individuals themselves, as though they were characters in a play she was destined to outperform. Have you ever known someone who tears others down in private to build themselves up? Who uses mockery as a shield against insecurity? That's how Jessica began to interpret Meghan's behavior. But instead of laughing along, Jessica felt increasingly uneasy. She wasn't just Meghan's friend anymore. She was the keeper of a secret narrative, one that contradicted everything the world believed. And here's the most disturbing part. Meghan's disdain wasn't limited to the royals by blood. According to Jessica, Meghan even turned her sharp tongue on Harry. Not always, not publicly, but in moments of frustration, Meghan allegedly belittled him. He's too emotional, Meghan once confided, Jessica claims. He gets carried away like a little boy who never grew up. Jessica was stunned. How could Meghan belittle the very man she had fought so hard to marry? The man who had given up family, tradition, and reputation for her? Jessica wondered if this was love, or if Harry was just another piece in Meghan's carefully designed puzzle. By this point, Jessica had begun to feel the strain of carrying such knowledge. Outwardly, she supported Meghan. She stood by her side, defended her in conversations, and helped her navigate the relentless press coverage. But inwardly, she wrestled with doubt. Each mocking remark was like a hairline crack in the glass. Individually, they seemed small, but together, they formed a web of fractures that Jessica knew would one day shatter. And it wasn't just Meghan's words, it was her delivery. Jessica recalls the smirks, the eye rolls, the sarcastic tone that accompanied each jab. These weren't words of a woman under stress. They were the words of someone who thought she saw through the entire charade of royalty. Someone who believed she was smarter, sharper, and more deserving than the people around her. Jessica says she sometimes tried to change the subject to lighten the mood. But Meghan's sharpness lingered. And with each new comment, Jessica realized something unsettling. Meghan didn't just dislike the monarchy. She seemed to hold it in contempt. Now think about that. Meghan wasn't just marrying into a family. She was marrying into an institution, one of the oldest and most revered in the world. Billions of people looked up to it. Yet in Meghan's private words, Jessica heard only disdain. That contradiction, that duality, was what haunted her. And then came the scandal that would put everything into perspective, the bridesmaid dress story. Meghan's claim in her Oprah interview that Kate made her cry before the wedding became a global talking point. But Jessica, who knew what really happened, says that moment revealed the true depth of Meghan's manipulation. Because, according to palace staff and Jessica's own recollections, the truth wasn't that Kate made Meghan cry. It was Meghan who reduced Kate to tears. For Jessica, this was the breaking point. It wasn't just mocking words anymore. It was a weaponization of narrative, a rewriting of truth for sympathy. And if Meghan could do that to Kate in public, what else was she capable of? And Jessica knew one thing for certain. The bridesmaid dress scandal would not only test Meghan's credibility, it would test Jessica's loyalty. Because Meghan expected her friend to back the story, no matter what the truth really was. And that demand, Jessica says, would drag her into a storm she never asked for. It started as a whisper, then grew into one of the most infamous stories of Meghan Markle's entire royal saga, the bridesmaid dress scandal. Meghan, in her bombshell Oprah interview, told the world that Kate Middleton had made her cry in the days leading up to the royal wedding. It was presented as a moment of cruelty, a glimpse into the coldness of palace life. The audience gasped. Sympathy poured in. Meghan was painted as the victim. But Jessica Mulroney, sitting in silence, knew the truth, and it was the exact opposite of what Meghan told the world. According to Jessica, it wasn't Kate who made Meghan cry. It was Meghan who reduced Kate to tears. And that moment, Jessica says, changed everything. Let's go back to the days before the wedding. Tensions were already running high. The palace was a pressure cooker, with staff running on little sleep and emotions running wild. The flower girl dresses, delicate, hand-stitched pieces, were a final detail that needed to be perfected. Kate, meticulous by nature, voiced concerns about the fit of Princess Charlotte's dress. Meghan, already on edge, allegedly snapped. Jessica remembers the scene vividly. Meghan was pacing, phone in hand, voice sharp. Kate's comments about the dress were relayed, and instead of listening, Meghan lashed out. She dismissed Kate's concerns as nitpicking, accused her of undermining the process, and, in a cutting remark Jessica never forgot, allegedly told Kate she was acting like a servant, not a future queen. Think about the weight of those words. In public, Meghan would later portray Kate as the aggressor. In private, Jessica says Meghan was the one delivering the blows. And Kate, poised, composed, and protective of her daughter, was left in tears. Now here's the chilling part. Meghan didn't just move on from the argument. According to Jessica, she saw an opportunity. When the time came to sit down with Oprah, Meghan flipped the story. She inverted reality. Instead of admitting that she had hurt Kate, she claimed that Kate had hurt her. It wasn't just misremembering. Jessica believes it was deliberate. This is where the cracks turned into fractures. Jessica says she watched in disbelief as Meghan told the world her version. She knew the emails existed, messages from palace staff documenting the incident, notes that contradicted Meghan's claims. She knew the staff testimony would never align with Meghan's narrative. And yet, there Meghan was, looking Oprah in the eye and presenting the opposite of what had happened. Doesn't that make you wonder? If someone could twist such a specific, documented event, how many other truths were rewritten for sympathy? Jessica's silence became unbearable. She knew the palace had the receipts. She knew Meghan's story was shaky at best. But she also knew speaking up would mean betraying a friend who had trusted her with every secret. That's the impossible position Meghan put her in. Loyalty versus truth. And here's where the pressure grew darker. Meghan, sensing the possibility of leaks, allegedly pressed Jessica to stay aligned with her version. "You know what really happened," Meghan would say. "Don't let them spin it against me." Those words were less a plea than a command. Jessica says she felt cornered, as though she was being asked not just to stay quiet, but to silently endorse a lie. Meanwhile, palace staff were buzzing. Emails circulated. Memos were written. The truth was there in black and white. Meghan had made Kate cry, not the other way around. But the palace, bound by its never complain, never explain mantra, stayed silent. And in that silence, Meghan's narrative took root. Jessica's heart sank as she watched the public reaction. Meghan was praised for her honesty. Kate was criticized for her coldness. The roles were reversed, and the world bought it. Jessica wanted to scream, to correct the record, but she didn't. She told herself it wasn't her battle. But the guilt weighed heavily. And then came the investigators. Whispered conversations within the palace hinted that Meghan's Oprah testimony could cross into dangerous territory. If she repeated the story in legal filings or formal documents, it could amount to perjury. And when palace aides quietly confirmed that questionable evidence had been presented to back Meghan's claims, the whispers turned into alarms. This wasn't just gossip anymore. This was potential obstruction of justice. Meghan wasn't just bending the truth in a television interview. She was at risk of bending it in official settings where lies carry consequences. And Jessica, who knew the truth firsthand, realized she was sitting on a powder keg. Now let's pause. Imagine carrying that knowledge. You know the truth, but the world believes the lie. You watch your friend rise to global fame, draped in sympathy, while the person she hurt, Kate, is forced to endure the world's judgment in silence. How would you feel? Angry? Betrayed? Complicit? Jessica says she felt all of it at once. And here's the twist that made everything worse. Meghan wasn't just satisfied with telling her version. Jessica recalls Meghan celebrating the public's reaction, saying things like, "They finally see Kate for who she is, and now they'll understand why I couldn't stay silent." To Jessica, those words revealed something chilling. Meghan wasn't a victim telling her truth. She was a strategist, shaping her image at the expense of others, even family. For Jessica, this was the moment she could no longer pretend. The whispers about Meghan mocking the Queen, the disdain for William and Kate, the sarcastic remarks about, and those could all be excused as stress or nerves. But this was deliberate. This was rewriting history to protect herself and vilify others. And Jessica knew one thing with absolute certainty. If Meghan could rewrite the story about Kate and the bridesmaid dresses, she could rewrite anything. But Meghan's manipulation didn't end with Kate. Jessica says it extended to Harry himself. And the way Meghan allegedly controlled his emotions, his loyalty, and even his identity would shock Jessica more than anything else she had witnessed. Because according to her, Meghan didn't just reshape her own narrative. She reshaped Harry's entire life. And that, Jessica says, was when the fairy tale turned into something much darker. Have you ever watched a friend fall in love so deeply that they seem to lose themselves in the process? That's what Jessica Mulroney says she saw with Prince Harry. At first, it looked like passion, devotion, a man finally finding happiness after years of turmoil. But over time, Jessica claims she began to see something else, something far more troubling. Meghan wasn't just Harry's partner. She was his guide, his protector, his gatekeeper, and, in some ways, his puppeteer. According to Jessica, The manipulation wasn't obvious in the beginning. Meghan played her part perfectly, warm, supportive, and endlessly attentive. She listened to Harry's frustrations, validated his feelings about the press, and fed into his long-standing grievances with the palace. For a man who had always felt overshadowed by William, by duty, by the relentless comparisons, this was intoxicating. Meghan made him feel like the main character in his own story. Jessica recalls late-night phone calls where Meghan would brag, half-joking but deadly serious, about how easily she could sway Harry. "He'll believe me over anyone else," Meghan once confided, according to Jessica. "It's not even hard." That statement left Jessica uneasy. Love is supposed to empower both people, but this sounded like control. Think about it. Harry had grown up in a world where trust was a rare commodity. His mother, Diana, was betrayed by those closest to her. His teenage years were marred by scrutiny. His adult life was shaped by headlines that reduced him to a caricature. The spare, the wild child, the broken prince. So when Meghan came along, offering unconditional belief in his pain, it must have felt like salvation. But Jessica now wonders, was it really love, or was it strategic manipulation? Jessica remembers moments that, at the time, seemed small but now feel chilling in hindsight. Harry would vent about his brother William's cautious nature, and Meghan would fan the flames, saying things like, "He'll never understand you," or "He only sees you as competition." When Harry expressed guilt about stepping back from royal duties, Meghan allegedly soothed him with lines like, "You were never meant for that life. You're better than all of them." Have you ever had a friend who suddenly started echoing only one person's voice? That's what Jessica noticed with Harry. The more time he spent with Meghan, the more his words, his opinions, his worldview sounded like hers. And then there were the family gatherings. Jessica says she witnessed Meghan carefully choreograph Harry's responses to subtle slights, real or imagined. If someone looked at Meghan the wrong way, she would later remind Harry of the insult, framing it as proof that his family didn't respect him. If someone offered advice, she would twist it into criticism. Slowly, Harry's trust in his family eroded, replaced by absolute loyalty to Meghan. Jessica confesses she initially admired Meghan's influence. After all, Harry seemed happier, more confident, more certain of himself. But as time went on, she began to see the cost. Meghan's influence wasn't just lifting Harry up, it was isolating him. Take the infamous us versus them dynamic. Jessica says Meghan repeated this phrase constantly. "It's us against the world." To Harry, who had always felt like an outsider in his own family, those words were powerful. They gave him purpose. But Jessica recognized them for what they were, a tool. Because when life becomes a battle of us versus them, the only safe place is by Meghan's side. And the deeper Harry went, the less independent he became. Jessica remembers one evening where Harry seemed to hesitate before answering a simple question about future plans. He looked to Meghan, as though waiting for her to speak first. That was the moment Jessica says she realized Harry wasn't just influenced, he was dependent. Now, ask yourself, have you ever seen a friend lose their individuality in a relationship? The way their opinions shift, their habits change, their identity blurs until they're almost unrecognizable? That's what Jessica claims happened to Harry. The irony, of course, is that Meghan presented herself as Harry's liberator. To the public, she was the woman who rescued him from a suffocating monarchy, who gave him freedom to live authentically. But Jessica insists the opposite was true. Meghan didn't free Harry, she redefined him. And the manipulation went beyond family politics. Jessica recalls how Meghan carefully managed Harry's media appearances, guiding his talking points, shaping his narrative, even correcting his language when he drifted from the script. At first, it looked like teamwork. But Jessica began to see it differently, as control disguised as support. One incident stands out in her memory. Harry had expressed doubts about doing a certain interview, worrying it would damage his already fragile relationship with William. Meghan, according to Jessica, dismissed his concerns. "This is bigger than them," she told him. "You're telling your truth. And your truth is my truth." Those last 4 words chilled Jessica. Because when one person's truth becomes another's, where does individuality end? The more Jessica reflected, the more she saw Meghan's influence as a form of emotional dependency. Harry wasn't just in love, he was tethered. Every decision, every thought, every loyalty funneled back to Meghan. And here's where Jessica's unease turned into fear. Because Meghan's disdain for the royals, her mockery of traditions, her rewriting of narratives, those were now Harry's beliefs too. He had absorbed them, repeated them, and built his identity around them. Jessica found herself asking, was Harry truly free, or had he traded one institution, the monarchy, for another, more personal form of control? This question gnawed at her as she watched Meghan and Harry prepare to step away from royal life. To the world, it looked like a bold, courageous move. But to Jessica, it looked like the final stage of Meghan's plan, separating Harry not just from his family, but from his very identity as a prince. And she was about to discover that Meghan's plan didn't stop at mocking the royals or manipulating Harry's emotions. Jessica claims Meghan had revealed something even bigger, a long-term vision that made everything else look like small steps. Because according to Jessica, Meghan never truly intended to embrace the monarchy. She intended to dismantle it from the inside, walk away, and replace it with something far more profitable, her own empire. And that master plan, once revealed, left Jessica speechless. What if the royal wedding wasn't the endgame, but just the opening act? That's the thought that kept circling in Jessica Mulroney's mind once she began piecing together the little things Meghan had said, the offhand remarks, the patterns that made more sense in hindsight. According to Jessica, Meghan never saw herself as a permanent duchess trapped in the gilded cage of monarchy. No, her eyes were always set on something bigger, something beyond Windsor walls. And once Jessica realized what that plan was, she says it chilled her. Let's rewind. Meghan had always been ambitious, even back in her Suits days. Jessica remembers her talking about wanting to be more than a supporting actress on a mid-tier cable show. Meghan craved influence. She craved recognition. And, Jessica claims, she saw Harry as both the love of her life and the ultimate vehicle to achieve it. Marrying into the royal family gave her instant global recognition, but that wasn't the destination, it was the launch pad. Jessica recalls a private dinner conversation months before the wedding. Meghan leaned back, glass of wine in hand, and said with a mischievous smile, "You don't think I'm really going to be doing ribbon cuttings at age 50, do you? That's not me." Jessica laughed at the time, assuming it was nerves. But now, she says, it was foreshadowing. Meghan wasn't joking. She never intended to be the dutiful duchess. The pattern became clearer with every conversation. Meghan scoffed at the endless events royals attended, calling them boring costume parties. She mocked the idea of curtsying to anyone but herself. She even told Jessica that she and Harry would one day write their own rules outside the monarchy. Jessica didn't know what that meant at the time. Now, she says, it's obvious. And here's where the brilliance, or the ruthlessness, comes in. Meghan didn't just want out. She wanted leverage. Jessica claims Meghan told her more than once, "As long as I'm in, I have power. Once I'm out, I'll have freedom. And with Harry, I get both." Think about that for a second. Meghan wasn't trapped. She was positioning, playing the role of Duchess long enough to gain worldwide attention, then walking away with Harry at her side, ready to cash in on a global brand. Jessica says she first realized the full extent of Meghan's plan during late-night strategy talks. Meghan would casually float ideas about Hollywood comebacks, global foundations, and media ventures. She spoke less like a royal bride and more like a CEO planning a company launch. "The monarchy is just one act," Meghan allegedly told her. "The real show comes later." This is where the manipulation of Harry dovetails with the master plan. Jessica says Meghan carefully nurtured Harry's resentment toward his family, framing them as cold and unsupportive. The more Harry leaned on Meghan, the easier it became to convince him that leaving the monarchy wasn't betrayal, it was liberation. And once Harry believed that, the path was clear. But Jessica also recalls Meghan making remarks that stunned her with their brazenness. "Being royal is nice," Meghan allegedly said once, "but being global is better. Royals can't make real money. I can." That single line stuck with Jessica because it revealed the plan in one sentence. Meghan didn't just want a title, she wanted a brand. Now ask yourself, have you ever known someone who used one chapter of their life purely as a stepping stone to the next? That's what Jessica claims Meghan was doing with the monarchy. To the world, it looked like Meghan had been victimized into leaving. To Jessica, It looked like Meghan had orchestrated her exit all along. And the signs were there, if you knew where to look. Meghan's fascination with Hollywood never disappeared. Her connections to agents, producers, and media executives only grew stronger. Jessica even recalls Meghan joking, "The cameras follow me now more than they ever did on Suits. Imagine what I can do with that." It wasn't just about fame. It was about profit. Jessica says Meghan often compared herself to powerful American women: Oprah, Beyoncé, Michelle Obama. She admired their ability to build empires beyond their initial roles. And, Jessica insists, Meghan believed she could do the same, by using the royal story as her launchpad. The shocking part for Jessica wasn't the ambition itself. Ambition can be admirable. It was the contempt Meghan showed for the very institution she was using. Jessica claims Meghan never spoke with genuine respect about the monarchy. Instead, she viewed it as a restrictive costume drama that she would eventually outgrow. And then came the moment Jessica says she'll never forget. Meghan allegedly confided, "I'll give them just enough Meghan the Duchess before I become Meghan the Mogul." Those words stuck like glue, because they confirmed what Jessica had begun to suspect. This wasn't rebellion born out of oppression. This was strategy born out of calculation. Meghan wasn't escaping the monarchy. She was using it, milking it for visibility, before stepping into the global spotlight on her own terms. Jessica's realization was gut-wrenching. She had believed in Meghan, defended her, even admired her strength. But now she saw her friend in a new light, not as a victim fighting for survival, but as a strategist building an empire at any cost. And yet, Jessica stayed silent. Out of loyalty, out of fear, out of hope that maybe, just maybe, she was misinterpreting. But deep down, she knew the truth. The Meghan she had once called a friend wasn't just ambitious. She was unstoppable. And the closer Meghan got to pulling Harry away from his family, the more Jessica realized she was watching a plan unfold that could change the monarchy forever. But as shocking as Meghan's master plan sounded, Jessica says it was nothing compared to what came next. Because Meghan didn't stop at mocking traditions or planning her exit. Jessica claims she saw Meghan cross a line that no royal ally could defend. And that moment, Jessica says, was when admiration turned into fear. Every friendship has a moment where the air shifts, where things that once felt unshakable suddenly crack. For Jessica Mulroney, that moment came when she says Meghan Markle finally crossed a line she could no longer excuse. Up until then, Jessica had rationalized the sharp comments, the manipulation, the ambitious master plan. She told herself Meghan was under stress, that the royal family was suffocating, that anyone in her position might lash out. But then came the breaking point. The moment Jessica says Meghan's disdain went from private jokes to open mockery of the late Queen herself. It happened during what should have been a quiet, reflective moment. The wedding was behind them. The chaos of press coverage had somewhat settled, and Meghan was beginning her new life as a duchess. For the outside world, she was radiant, smiling at public engagements, cooing at children, nodding respectfully during formal ceremonies. But Jessica says in private, Meghan couldn't resist tearing down the very people she smiled at in public. Jessica remembers one evening at Frogmore Cottage. Meghan was venting about the endless rules, what to wear, when to smile, who to stand next to. Harry had left the room, and Meghan, glass in hand, allegedly launched into a monologue. "The Queen," she scoffed, "is nothing more than a national mascot. A little old lady people wave at from a distance. The idea that I have to bow to her is ridiculous." Jessica froze. It wasn't the first time she'd heard Meghan mock the monarchy, but the brazenness of it struck her. This wasn't nerves or playful teasing. It was contempt, delivered without hesitation. And worse, Meghan wasn't even lowering her voice. Jessica realized she wasn't just being confided in. She was being dared to react. Think about that for a second. A woman who had just married into the most respected family in Britain, mocking its matriarch with disdain, and doing so in front of someone who knew exactly what that respect meant. What would you have done? Laugh awkwardly, stay silent, or call her out, risking the wrath of a friend who had proven she held grudges like weapons? Jessica chose silence, but inside, something shifted. She could no longer reconcile the Meghan who charmed the public with the Meghan she saw behind closed doors. The duality was too sharp, the performance too practiced. And here's where it gets even heavier. Jessica says Meghan didn't stop at words. She began to act as though the monarchy's rules simply didn't apply to her. Publicly, she played the role. Privately, she rolled her eyes at protocol, mocked courtiers as dinosaurs, and dismissed traditions as dead rituals. Jessica began to realize Meghan wasn't just mocking individuals. She was mocking the entire institution. The irony, of course, is that Meghan's brand depended on that institution. Without the monarchy, she was a Hollywood actress with moderate fame. With the monarchy, she became one of the most famous women in the world. Jessica says this contradiction gnawed at her. Meghan was simultaneously dismissing and exploiting the very thing that gave her global power. And then came the remark Jessica says she could never forget. Meghan allegedly leaned in one evening and said, "One day, people won't remember the Queen. They'll remember me." Those words, Jessica claims, sent chills down her spine. Because it wasn't just mockery anymore. It was ambition bordering on delusion. Meghan wasn't content to coexist within the monarchy. She wanted to eclipse it. This was the breaking point. Jessica realized she was no longer witnessing harmless gossip or private frustrations. She was watching someone systematically dismantle the foundation of respect that held an institution together. And she, by staying silent, was enabling it. But Jessica's silence wasn't the only one. Palace staff, too, had started to take notice. Whispers circulated about Meghan's disdain for protocol, about her cutting remarks, about the growing tension between her and senior royals. Jessica wasn't imagining it. Others had seen the same cracks. And it was only a matter of time before those whispers reached higher levels. Still, Jessica wrestled with loyalty. Meghan had been her friend, her confidant, the woman she had once defended to anyone who questioned her motives. To betray that friendship felt unthinkable. But to protect Meghan's secrets now felt like betraying the truth. This inner conflict tore Jessica apart. She found herself avoiding Meghan's calls, dreading the next sharp remark, the next impossible request for loyalty. The friendship that once felt like a sisterhood now felt like a trap. And then came the memo. Jessica says palace aides quietly began. The fallout hit Meghan in waves. Once hailed as the breath of fresh air for the monarchy, she was now painted by some corners of the press as a bully, a manipulator, a diva. Jessica watched her friend unravel, oscillating between defiance and despair. One moment, Meghan was plotting her next media move. The next, she was raging about betrayal. And Jessica? She found herself in an impossible position. She knew the palace had damning material. She knew Meghan was playing with fire. But speaking out meant betraying her oldest friend, while staying silent meant watching a train wreck she couldn't stop. This was the fallout. Not one explosive scandal, but a slow drip of revelations that chipped away at Meghan's image, leaving Jessica to wonder how long the facade could last. And when the facade finally cracked, Jessica says she saw a side of Meghan that was darker than anything she had imagined. Because when Meghan realized her empire was crumbling, Jessica claims she witnessed the Duchess unleash a level of fury, paranoia, and desperation that even she wasn't prepared for. And what Jessica saw in that moment convinced her that Meghan wasn't just fighting for survival. She was fighting to control everyone around her, no matter the cost. Pressure does strange things to people. Some bend under it. Some break. And some, like Meghan Markle, according to Jessica Mulroney, turn it into a weapon, lashing out at anyone who dares get too close. By the time the palace memos began leaking and whispers of Meghan's private disdain started circling, the Duchess was no longer just dealing with stress. She was consumed by it. Jessica says she saw it firsthand. The anger, the paranoia, the obsession with controlling every narrative. Meghan wasn't merely under pressure. She was becoming defined by it. To the public, Meghan was still polished. She appeared in interviews with perfect composure, spoke passionately about her struggles, and carried herself as the picture of resilience. But behind closed doors, Jessica paints a different image. Meghan's mood swung wildly. One moment she was calm, plotting her next move with clinical precision. The next, she was furious, pacing the room, railing about betrayal from staff, family, even friends. Jessica recalls late-night phone calls where Meghan would spiral into rants, convinced that palace aides were conspiring to destroy her. "They're all against me," Meghan allegedly said more than once. "Every smile, every gesture, it's all fake." They want me gone. Jessica tried to reassure her, but the paranoia was relentless. Meghan was no longer just reacting to criticism. She was anticipating it, almost inviting it, as though she thrived on the battle. Have you ever known someone who becomes more alive in conflict than in peace? That's how Jessica describes Meghan. The more pressure mounted, the more Meghan seemed to lean into confrontation, as if harmony was boring but drama gave her purpose. And Harry? Jessica says he became Meghan's echo. Whenever Meghan lashed out at the palace, Harry echoed her frustrations. Whenever Meghan cried foul, Harry reinforced her narrative. Jessica began to wonder if Harry even had a separate perspective anymore, or if Meghan's voice had simply become his. But Meghan's obsession with control didn't stop at the palace. Jessica recalls how Meghan micromanaged everything: public statements, outfits, even the tone Harry used in interviews. She rehearsed lines with him, corrected his phrasing, and reminded him constantly of their truth. Jessica says it was as if Meghan saw every interaction as a scene in a movie, and she was both the star and the director. The pressure also brought out another side: Meghan's fixation on image. Jessica remembers Meghan spending hours scrolling through headlines, dissecting social media comments, demanding to know what people thought of her. A single negative article could ruin her day. A glowing feature would make her euphoric. It wasn't just about reputation, it was about control. Meghan wanted not just to be liked, but to dictate how she was liked. And when the coverage wasn't flattering, Jessica says the fury was volcanic. Meghan allegedly accused journalists of racism, courtiers of sabotage, even her own friends of disloyalty if they didn't publicly defend her. Jessica herself began to feel the heat. Once Meghan's closest confidant, she suddenly found herself being tested. "Do you believe me?" Meghan would ask. "You're on my side, right?" These weren't questions, they were ultimatums. Jessica admits that the friendship began to feel less like loyalty and more like captivity. She could no longer voice doubts without triggering Meghan's wrath. She could no longer offer perspective without being accused of betrayal. The Meghan she had once admired, funny, warm, ambitious, was being swallowed by suspicion and rage. And here's the cruel irony. The more Meghan fought to control the narrative, the more it slipped away. Palace leaks grew louder. Journalists dug deeper. Former staff began speaking out, carefully, strategically, but enough to paint a picture of dysfunction. Jessica says she could see the walls closing in. But Meghan, instead of softening her edges, sharpened them. Now, imagine being Jessica in that storm, torn between defending a friend and acknowledging the truth. Watching as Meghan demanded loyalty at all costs, even when the story didn't align with reality. Feeling the weight of secrets that, if revealed, could upend everything. How would you cope? Would you stay silent, or would you finally draw the line? For Jessica, silence won, for a while. She watched Meghan unravel, watched Harry sink deeper into her orbit, and told herself she could endure it. But she admits the guilt was suffocating. Because with every headline, every controversy, she knew a version of the truth the public didn't. And then came the turning point. Jessica says there was one night, a dinner with Meghan and Harry, when she saw the transformation in full. Meghan, tense and angry, allegedly ranted about palace betrayal for nearly an hour. Harry sat silently, nodding, offering nothing of his own. When Meghan finished, she turned to Jessica and said, "This is war. And if you're not with me, you're against me." That was it. The moment Jessica realized the friendship had changed beyond repair. She wasn't a confidant anymore. She was a soldier in Meghan's private army, and neutrality wasn't an option. And the more Meghan doubled down, the darker things became. Jessica began to fear what would happen if she broke ranks. She had seen Meghan turn on staff, turn on family, even turn on Harry in moments of frustration. If she could do that to them, what would she do to Jessica if she dared to speak the truth? The pressure was crushing Meghan, but it was crushing Jessica too. And soon, Meghan's need to control the narrative would lead her to betray even the person who had stood by her the longest. Because according to Jessica, the final betrayal was still to come, and it would cut deeper than anything before.